Hey guys, Frank here with another episode of Modern Church Leader. Here with my new bud, Travis Cottrell, coming all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. Travis, great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Frank. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's great to meet you too, man. It was fun catching up before this, learning that you've got ties to San Diego, and I mean we've got ties to Nashville with Caroline working out there, and it's pretty cool.
That's right.
Next time you're in town, you got to let me know, and we'll hang.
I will, and we'll be there soon. You know, one of my most prized loved ones in all the earth is living in San Diego, my daughter. So I pray for San Diego often.
Amen. We need it. We need it. Pray for the tax situation and all that kind of stuff.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, I'm not praying that gets better because I don't want her to stay there. I'm just praying she's safe until she wises up and comes home.
And if you don't, lots of people move to Nashville, I hear, from California. So I hear there's quite the influx.
Listen, in our neighborhood, which is a newer neighborhood, we have a new street, and there are, 40 houses maybe, and there are 30 people from California on the street.
I've heard that story another time. We have some other folks that work at Tidely. They've been in Nashville. They moved from LA a few years back, but they literally said like the community they live in, they call it something like related to California because it's literally all people from California on their street.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah, they're everywhere. And they're like, we're from California. We're sorry. And we're like, it's fine. We're glad you're here. Come on in. The water's nice. It's good here in Tennessee.
Oh my gosh. Well, Travis, tell us, you are the lead worship pastor at Brentwood Baptist, but you've been in worship ministry for a long time, 30 plus years. And you have quite the career there. So I'd love to hear a little bit about you and kind of how you got into ministry, into worship ministry, and how you got to where you're at today.
I kind of just fell into ministry because I haven't even thought about this in a long time, but when I was growing up, I grew up and I got saved at an early age. All my family knew the Lord, loved the Lord, and church was of high value to us.
Mm-hmm.
Community was of high value to us. And I grew up so immersed in it, which obviously also has its downsides too. But for all the things that were good that were brought into my life, they were really good.
Mm-hmm.
Just the community, the importance of investing in something that's bigger than you, the importance of reaching out and serving. And so all of that stuff, I was so immersed in it. I never even considered ever doing anything else. Like the Lord just gave me this right here.
Right.
And I didn't know now inside that context, I never really knew exactly what I was going to do. Am I going to be a singer? Am I an artist? Am I going to lead worship, which when I was growing up, I'm a lot older than you, Frank, that wasn't even a thing. There were only a handful of people living on the earth, making a living, leading worship, just in the biggest of churches and the kind of weirdest of ways. It wasn't a thing where I was growing up. But I went to school at Appalachian State University in my hometown in Boone, North Carolina. And I transferred to Belmont University because I just felt like the Lord wanted me to come to Nashville. I didn't have enough sense really to know everything that went on in Nashville at the time. I knew there was a lot of Christian music there, but I didn't know what it meant for me. And so that was the beginning of it. And I spent the next, from the time I was 20 when I moved to the time I was 40, just making a living, creating resources for the church, choir resources, praise team resources, and then traveling and leading worship for events and conferences and just doing a little bit of everything. It wasn't till I was 40 years old that I ever even worked at a church full time.
Really?
So yeah, I love the church.
Yeah.
I love the church. I had a heart for the church. I was living to resource the church, but I never served at a church full as my job until I was 40.
Your main job. What kind of resources? It sounds like you were traveling, doing some stuff, and I'm sure that was, how you also, made what you needed to feed the family. But what kind of resources were you creating for church worship and things like that?
Well, I was doing in my late 20s, I started, like, I just had some inroads into the publishing world as it pertains to like church choirs,
Mm-hmm.
like the creating music for church musicians, whether or not if they had a choir or if they just had a praise team or they had an orchestra or just a band. That in my late 20s, I just found myself writing charts.
Okay.
And being connected in those circles of places that had influence into those churches. So I was writing songs and I was writing charts every
Okay.
week for
Very cool.
publishing houses that were giving churches music to sing and play.
That's really cool. Did you enjoy that? Was that like?
I love it. I still
Yeah.
do it. I mean,
Okay.
in many ways, I feel like, with the exception of the addition of working full time at a church when I was 40, which I'm doing still now, everything I was doing in my late 20s, I'm still doing.
Yeah.
It all looks very much the same. It's just maybe the landscape's a little different. The stakes maybe to some people's eyes may look a little higher, even though they don't feel it feel it to me. I still just feel like, gosh, I'm just trying to create things that help church musicians be more confident, have things that they can use and take and make their own and lead their people well on Sundays.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. How did you know you were on to something? Move to Nashville, you get into that scene a little bit, but when it comes to like writing music and being in that scene, and then that being part of like kind of your profession at that time, how'd you know when you were onto something? Like, oh, I could do this. This.
This is going to sound gross. And this is embarrassing, and I didn't mean for it to happen, but I just jumped into church service. Like when I transferred to Belmont and I moved to Nashville, I jumped into serving at a church,
Yeah.
getting involved. The first thing I ever did was I was the piano player for the children's choir. Like on Wednesday nights, I just showed up and played for 4th through 6th graders.
Nice.
Because I loved it. And I wanted to be, so I just kept serving. But the gross thing about it is that everything that happened in my career that was like advancement of some sort happened from a relationship in church. And I don't think you can go and serve at a church with that expectation, because that's stupid.
Yeah.
But it happened that way. So as I began to serve and have this community in this church, these opportunities kept coming to me from people in Nashville who went to that church and had some place of influence, and they saw something in me and said, "We want you to come do this here," and I would jump in and give it a try.
Right.
"We want you to come sing on this," and I would jump in and give it a try. And so then every time God would open a door, I would just kind of walk through and kind of feel where it felt like God was giving me favor for my gifts, because I do believe that He gives us favor to do what we're called to do in that moment. And I kind of felt His favor in some of those doors to serve. And so I just kept walking through them, and still feel like I'm doing the same thing, kind of.
Yeah, I love that. What was one that you walked through, or maybe give me a few if you got some good ones, that you were like, holy cow, what just happened?
Right. So there was if you've heard of Lifeway Christian Resources,
Yeah,
it's a large organization, and the amount of events that they produced in the 80s and the 90s was crazy. And one of the kind of like the guy that was over all of the student events was a gentleman who went to the church I went to. And out of the blue, he calls me and says, "Will you come lead worship for 4 events for us this year?" And I was like, I was 25 years old, and these were big events. And this was before the days, Frank, where like people were cutting their teeth in youth group,
right?
And putting together these amazing student bands, getting record deals, or like all that stuff that just didn't happen. And I was just serving at church. He calls me to do this, and I was so thrilled. The first event that he ever booked me on was the same event that 10 years before to the day, was the event that I walked into I walked into that event as a 15-year-old, and I walked in the room and I saw a guy leading worship. I'd never seen anything like it in my life because I was from a small Baptist church where it looked really different.
Yeah.
I walked into the room. I looked up. There was a guy at a keyboard leading songs and leading 1,500 students and leading and singing. And in my spirit, like I've had about 4 times in my life where something just dropped in my spirit, like that is the right thing for you. And that was the first one of those that ever happened. And I walked in and I saw that guy, and it was like the Lord just dropped in my spirit, that is what you're going to do. And so fast forward 10 years, the first thing that I ever launched out and did in that capacity was the same event at the same location with the same name, the same everything, to the day, the literal same day. It was December 28th, 1995.
Crazy.
When I walked into the room, it was December 28th, 1985 as a 15-year-old. It was just crazy, like little affirmation, little pat on my head. I won't even say the back, pat on my head from the Lord going, just keep going. I got this.
Yeah.
So that was pretty crazy. The same year, no, it was 1 year later, I had begun leading like some singles, events, other things for Lifeway. And I really developed this great relationship with this girl, this lady that worked at Lifeway. And she called me and said, hey, we've got a new women's Bible study teacher that we want you to come and do 4 events with us this next year.
Mm-hmm.
Her name's Beth Moore. Like she's written a Bible study for us. We're going to try and see if anybody will come to these events. Would you lead worship?
Yeah.
And I said, it's a women's event. Why don't you have a women's worship leader? And she said, I don't know. I can't answer that. I don't know why. We just feel like the Lord is calling us to ask you to do it. Will you do it? I said, fine, whatever. I'll do it. And that was 1998.
Yeah.
And
that turned out all right.
It turned all right. Yeah. We're starting our 26th year this week.
Are you still involved? You're still.
Yeah. Yeah. This is year 26.
Wow.
Year 26.
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Yeah. It's just crazy. Yeah. How God, you can't usually see it going in, right? But you look back and you can kind of see those types of things and you're like, man, that's cool. Thank you.
Right. And I was never, Frank, you you seem smart. You're a lot smarter than me. I can promise you. But I never was the guy who forecasted for myself.
Right.
Or like had a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan, or, the people say, go to the end and take the steps backwards and figure out how you want to get there. I never was that guy. I was just the guy that kind of just walked through the doors. I just served with my head down and just walked through the doors that God would open in front of me. And, it's kind of, I want to say served me well, but what it really done is it's kept me busy. It's kept me busy with my hands and my heart and my mind working all this time.
Right. Well, I mean, it's God teaches us to serve and to stay humble, and that He's going to take care of us. So it sounds like it's been working out. It's hard to do, right? Especially when you things come your way and all that. It's hard to stay that way. But
right.
How did you get from? Okay, so that's obviously covered a long span, but now you're the full-time lead worship pastor at Brentwood Baptist. You've been doing that for 4 years, you said?
4 years.
Yeah. So how did that come to be? How'd you get, into that type of role? It doesn't sound like you came up through the traditional way of going to be a worship leader, and that's at a church, at a local church. But you've landed there, at least for this time in your life.
Yeah.
How did that go down?
Well, I love the church, but I had no desire to work at a church. I was super busy, like in the early 2000s, I started with Beth in 98. And then from 2000 to 2010 was just like, busy writing church music and church musicals. And I was signed on a record deal for a while with Integrity Music, and then moved to another record label in that same decade, and busy just like touring, writing, being with Beth. We were having babies, we had 3 kids, and it was just a busy time. And I couldn't imagine that God would ever just make me buckle down and work at a church. I didn't want it. I didn't see it. But then in 2010, He did that exact thing. So he and it was weird timing because I had just released a record in 2009 that was kind of like my most successful one to that date, and that had a lot of traction for some different and new areas. And the Lord said, we had just bought a house too in Franklin that we thought, gosh, we'll bring our grandkids home to this house and blah, blah, blah. And just like that, he was like, I want y'all to get out of this town and go serve a church. It was out of the blue.
Yeah.
And so, but we did it. So we moved to Jackson, Tennessee, which is 2 hours west of Nashville. We look back, we have such a different view now than we did then. And we see God's fingerprints all over the whys, you know, why it happened. You know, those are whole other stories. But I kept doing as much of what I was doing as I could, but I really did just focus on those people in that church in Jackson, Tennessee for a whole decade.
Mm-hmm.
And we jumped into life there, and we just began to get brand new paradigms of what it was like to serve God's people, to serve the church. And we did that for 10 years. And then after 10 years, and I will say the 20 years before that, when I was in Nashville, we were aware of Brentwood Baptist. We loved that church, had a great reputation, but we had no pulling to it.
Right.
Like we never went to church here. Had lots of friends and coworkers and that went to Brentwood, but it just really wasn't on our radar. And the worship pastor for 25 years was a mentor and a friend of mine. He was a man that when I did move to Jackson and began serving a church, he spoke into my life in a lot of ways. So we kept in touch. And then, so 10 years go by, and it's time for Brentwood to have a new worship pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy that was before me, the guy that was here for 25 years, the second he called me, I knew it was the right thing.
Yeah.
It was the third time in my life. I said the first time, you know, when something just dropped in my spirit, I knew 100% this was our assignment.
Right.
To come here to Brentwood. And sure enough, it was. I mean, we did all the testing of it that we could, and the word and the prayer and the counsel. And, you know, right in the middle of COVID, I mean, like June of 2020, we moved here.
Yeah. Picked a good time. It was just all online. You didn't even have to.
Oh my gosh.
You didn't have to live there. You could have just stayed home.
Right. Kind of. Well, I commuted for a year because I had my youngest son was going into a senior year. And so we wanted to leave him plugged in. So I did commute for a year.
Yeah. Yeah. What's it like being a worship pastor at a church? Like compared to what you know, the previous kind of whatever decade or two when you were out doing other things, and then now you're at the local church serving every weekend. What, I don't know, give me what's your description? What's life like there?
The difference between the two lives is, you know, one is planting seeds and the other one is just watering them, planting and watering. You know, like when I would have this kind of itinerant ministry where I would go into churches and have a night of worship and pray that what we would do would give them a watermark moment that would kind of move them forward in some way. And now it's like just constantly watering those seeds,
right?
Constantly. And the only way you can really do that, I think, is when you're just willing to be watered yourself with them. Just like you just link arms and grow with people, and know that next week, you know, we're going to move the ball down the field together. And gosh, I don't know. It's a rich thing to do. It's a rich responsibility to have to link arms with a community of people in an area like worship, where, you know, people are coming from all these different expectations and experiences and mindsets and beliefs, and try to get them in some degree on the same field so that we can move forward together.
Right. Yeah. What makes a good, because there's the performing / actual, you know, leading songs and singing, and that there's that side of being a worship leader, I would assume. And then there's the leading people and like leading all the things that go into like putting on worship on a weekend or any other, you know, I'm sure you guys do other things outside of just Sundays or the weekends. What makes a good like worship leader that can do both?
I don't know if you find out. Will you tell me? I'm trying.
Yeah. You're
Um,
working it out still.
yeah. I feel like as little as you can pay attention to your own creativity and your own musical preference, or I just find that people are so not impressed with how good or slick we can be.
Right.
And that the language of reaching isn't excellence alone. It's not modernization of anything. It's not how cool we can be. It's all relationship. They don't care. My church does not care about my new songs. They don't care about how slick we are. I mean, I do believe that excellence brings an amount of favor that you can use to your advantage for the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the language you speak, because if you just speak a language of excellence, you just speak a language of music or whatever that is, then you miss most of the people.
Right.
Because they're there for community, whether they know it or not. And they're there to be heard and to be seen and to have a place to say something to God, as well as hear from him. So I have found that the most important thing is just to be in relationship with your people and understand what languages they speak, and speak their language,
Right.
rather than constantly forcing my own language down their throats.
Yeah. What does it practically look like day to day as a worship leader? Like leading the team. I'm sure you have some people that are on staff at the church with you, but you probably have lots of volunteers that you're leading, and just the mix of all that. You guys probably are doing things midweek and weekends and all of that. Like what's it look like to kind of lead your core team that helps you run everything?
That's like in layers. It's like peeling a puff pastry apart, like a croissant or something, all the different layers of all of that. The first layer is empowering my team that's here in this office, that they know as much or more as I do, and what they think about where we're going, where we're heading, and how to get there, that I value it as much as I value my own opinion, that I value their input, their output, their time, and their own creativity. And so I believe that a lot of success comes from empowering, and that goes to every level.
Right.
Like our lay leaders, the people that come and take care of my choir. So we have about 250 people in our choir.
Wow.
And we'll have about 170 active, on any given season. 170. We just did a concert on Palm Sunday. We had 192 sing. Crazy. And so empowering those leaders, like listening to them, asking them questions. What do you think about what do you think? I think creating leaders happens more easily when they feel respected and heard.
Yeah.
And so I believe in a constant transference of information back and forth to team members on every level, whether it's my team right here down this hall, or it's my team that's taking care of rhythm section choir. People respond when they're heard. Mm-hmm. And so I'm talking to them a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that's awesome. You, in kind of preparing a little bit, Caroline said that you're into humor. So leading with humor, or, you sound very relational, and that's the key to everything. But what's this deal with humor?
Well, I don't know. That's ridiculous. That's the dumbest thing she's ever said.
Yeah. Well, you probably see her in person. I see her on Zoom. So next time you see her, you can.
I do say, so like for instance, our choir, we have 170 on a Wednesday night, and it lasts for an hour and a half. And I feel like that is an hour and a half of stand up, but I don't mean stand up in the sense that I have to be funny, because I don't.
Right.
But you have to know how to keep a room buoyant for an hour and a half. Yeah. You got to understand pacing. You got to know when you got to go hard into music, and then you got to release it. And then you'll do something that they know really well, and then you got to have a release, and then something that's brand new. Like just keeping the pace of of leading a large group of people, you have to have a lot of self-awareness,
Yeah.
and you have to really know you're constantly measuring energy.
Right.
And so I do. I mean, I'm not funny. I don't think I'm that funny, but I do liken it to being stand-up a comedian, because, you have to keep that room right there
Yeah.
for
That makes
an
sense to me.
hour and a
Yeah.
half. I'm exhausted. Like, after choir, I go home and mouth breathe and watch Survivor for 2 hours. And that's the way I recover.
That's so good. No one talk to me. I am sitting here.
No one talk to me. Exactly.
Because if you do, I will not talk back. I've just been doing it for an hour and a half.
Right.
And nothing else is coming out. That's amazing.
It's a lot of words, but in all seriousness, that's an ironic way to begin this thought. In all seriousness, I'm not very serious. Like,
Yeah.
I do lend to levity, but I depend on the people. Like, people are funny and they're weird, and if you give them a space to be funny, and then
Amen.
you just kind of facilitate the room,
Yeah.
and without it getting out of hand, like, if I do have a skill, it's reining it in just at the nick of time before somebody is about to go berserko in the middle of a rehearsal or something, and like, you do have to know when to pull it in and go and turn the page. But
Yeah.
I do rely on that room being funny, and they are.
That's good.
And they don't mean to be.
They help
don't
you keep
always
the
mean to
energy
be.
up, because you do need,
Yeah.
I would imagine, with that many people, I'm sure there's a certain amount of energy just because there's that many people, but you got to
Right.
keep it going and keep people into it. So that makes sense. What last kind of like theme to talk about for a second here. How do you, this is probably more personal curiosity. You got like old school worship and older songs, and then you got the new stuff that's coming that you're going to hear on the radio and all of that. Like, how do you blend the two? How do you think about, you got the people that want to hear the old stuff and that's worship to them, and then you got, the young kids that want the new stuff, and you're trying to be modern and all the things, right? It's like, it seems like that's
Right.
always a thing in church. And, Brentwood Baptist has been around for a long time. So I would imagine you guys face it more than maybe
Yeah.
a church that's on the newer side, so they can just lean into the new stuff.
Frank, it can wear me the heck out.
How
I'll
many
tell you
fights
that.
have you had to break up over this topic?
I'm going to be really honest and say coming here in COVID, a lot of things were broken. Like, there were things where churches thought they had their stuff together and they didn't. And
Right.
COVID showed that.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that was necessarily true of Brentwood Baptist, but I am saying that there were some things broken that, as I had an opportunity to begin to rebuild post-COVID, with some sacred cows removed for me because COVID removed them, right?
So naturally happened.
It just naturally happened. I will say, I'm like any worship leader. I'm very much in the middle. Like, I'll see modern churches do their thing online, and I'll look and I'll go, God, will I ever have a church where I can pogo stick on Sunday morning? Like, that looks so fun, right? I want to do that. And then at the turn of the page that I'll open up, and there'll be some sacred chorale singing some gorgeous Bach cantata, and I'll go, Lord, will I ever do that?
Right.
We at this church here, like, we are right in the middle. And the way I consider it, and I feel like God has somehow graced me to do this. I don't always do it perfectly, but it stems from leadership with Beth Moore, and I say the same thing about our 26 years together is what I say about Brentwood Baptist. My goal is to cast for this group as wide of a net as possible, as wide of a net as possible. Because of where this church is, because of who the people are, there are a lot of older people. There are a lot of young families. I mean, we have hundreds and hundreds of babies every Sunday.
Yeah.
Like little babies, 0 to 2 years old, hundreds of them. So my goal is to always cast as wide of a net as possible. So you can't look at us and go, oh, we're a modern church. You can't look at us and go, oh, we're a traditional church. Like, I believe my assignment is to keep everybody stretched as as broadly as possible. And that's what we do.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it. I just, one Sunday at a time, I'm looking at songs and looking at the team that we have and going, Lord, what's our tapestry this weekend? What is it this weekend? Because we're not trying to fit into some kind of narrow lane.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, Travis, this has been awesome. Thanks for spending some time talking worship with us.
Thanks for having me, Frank.
Yeah.
Glad to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can folks go to, they can go to Brentwood Baptist website, obviously. Is there anywhere people can go to learn more about you or check out any of your stuff? YouTube channel?
You can go to traviscottrell.com. You can go to Spotify or Apple Music and find me. Listen, YouTube is a sore subject because I was so closely aligned with the label for so long. I have like literally tens of millions of views, and I own none of it. I have none of it. I don't even have a channel. I don't have a channel. Everybody else has it. Which is fine. That's fine, whatever. But you can find streaming, all the streaming stuff.
Apple Music, Spotify, TravisCottrell.com. Do it that way. Sounds like the right way.
That's it.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Travis, thanks for this, man. Thanks, guys, for listening. Definitely spread the love, share the episode, and we'll catch you guys next week on another episode of Modern Church Leader. See ya.